For this first episode, I want to spend some time with something that has felt both protective and expensive in my life, and that's being right. Not in the obvious way, not just in arguments, but in the quieter way, the internal way. The way being right can start to feel like responsibility. Let's explore the hidden cost of being right. Lessons Reconsidered is a reflective podcast about the lessons we think we've learned and what starts to change when we take another look. I'm the Teach. On this episode, we are going to talk about what being right has cost us, the distance it can create, and the burden you might be left with. Let's start with an assumption I once held. For a long time, I believed that being right was a form of care. That if I thought things through carefully enough, if I examined all sides, if I stayed fair, reasonable, consistent, then I was doing the responsible thing. Being right felt like integrity. It felt like stability. It felt like something solid I could stand on, especially in situations where emotions were messy, unclear, or unstable. I told myself that being right was being honest, that clarity was kindness, that accuracy was safety. And if something didn't land, I assumed it just hadn't been explained well enough yet. This was the assumptions that I carried. This was the lessons that I've learned and I've internalized within myself about being right. That belief made sense to me because being right felt safer than being uncertain. Uncertainty felt like failure. Being right felt grounding, like having something solid to hold on to when emotions felt unstable. It gave me something solid to stand on, especially in moments where things felt emotionally unclear. Being right gave me a role. I became the one who explains, the one who stays calm, the one who makes sense of things. In a lot of spaces, being right is rewarded. You're trusted more. You're listened to more. You're seen as reliable. So, of course, I leaned into it. But over time, I started noticing something else. Being right didn't always bring connection. Sometimes it brought distance. Sometimes it created silence. Sometimes resentment I couldn't name. But it always left me alone with my certainty. These were moments where clarity became a wall instead of a bridge. What felt certain to me, being right, created more problems than I could envision. Even if it felt safe and comfortable to me, it had a hidden cost that at times I could see, but never could see past the lessons and the assumptions I have acquired over the years. As I was reflecting on this, I realized 5 key factors that really affected and changed the way I now view being right. And one was it has reduced effectiveness. Another was it kind of creates a negative feedback loop. The third is it keeps me mentally rigid. It doesn't give me a lot of flexibility to think and see outside past these confines of being right. The fourth thing is it creates this relationship dysfunction. And number 5, and lastly, and the most important that really affected me in ways I couldn't imagine was how it creates isolation and loneliness. Let's start with the first thing I discovered as I was reflecting on being right and the lessons, and that is the reduced effectiveness of being right. I used to feel like I could explain just about anything to anyone. And if I explained it clearly enough, they would understand. And if they didn't, that was fine. I would just go a little deeper, add a little more detail, find another way to say it, change it so that I'm explaining it in a different way. But there were moments where that stopped working. Moments where even if I've taken all of these steps, they still didn't understand. Or maybe, and most likely, I wasn't in the right state. Maybe I was emotional. Maybe I didn't have the patience that the moment required. And the more I tried to explain, the less effective I became. I could even hear it in my own voice. I started to sound less certain, less grounded. And underneath all of that was this pressure. And it wasn't pressure that was created by them, or most likely it wasn't even pressure that was created in the moment. It was just this internal need, this internal struggle that I had. And what I needed them to understand was I need them to see that I'm right. And when they didn't, I didn't understand why. The second thing I started to notice was the negative feedback loop I was creating for myself. There was also something else happening underneath that. Something I didn't quite recognize at the time. There was a feeling attached to being right. And if I'm being honest, it was kind of intoxicating. It felt like I knew something you didn't. And not just anything, the correct way to see something. And over time, that feeling started to matter. Being right wasn't just about clarity anymore. It became directly tied to this feeling. The feeling of knowing that you are in a position over someone else and have knowledge or a moral high ground over them. This created an identity, a status of superiority. It became how I saw myself, and I started to chase that feeling. Even in moments where I wasn't fully grounded in what I was saying, the more I felt right, the more I acted like I couldn't be wrong. And that created a loop, the negative feedback loop. The need to be right reinforced the behavior that kept me from being challenged or even feeling like I can be wrong or incorrect in any way. So with my inability to effectively express myself or explain something, and the negative feedback loop that I was creating, it led me to my third realization, was how mentally rigid I became in trying to be right. I can remember arguments where it became so important that I was right that I effectively stopped listening. Not a little bit. I stopped listening completely. Not intentionally, but functionally. The goal wasn't understanding anymore. It became about proving. And because of that, there were moments where the other person said something meaningful, something that might have shifted my perspective, but I couldn't hear it. I was too locked into my position, too focused on making my point land. And the way I responded usually led them to respond the same way. And now, neither of us were listening to each other. We were just holding our ground. We were just so locked in to being right or being heard, because if you heard us, you would know that my side or my perspective was right, that we just didn't allow ourselves to hear, see, or listen to anything that would have taken us off of that stance or that position. That mental rigidity led directly into the fourth thing I realized about being right, was the relationship dysfunction that I was creating in my pursuit of trying to be right always. And that dynamic doesn't stay contained. It escalates. We stop listening. We stop caring about how we're coming across, but we're trying to just be right. And in our expression to each other, it starts to change. A simple disagreement turns into something heavier, not because it needed to, but because neither person was willing to move. I would even double down. They would double down. And the conversation would shift. We, at this point, just stopped listening about whatever the original conversation was, whatever we might have been discussing. And then tone would change. The energy would change. I can feel myself becoming more forceful, more aggressive, sometimes even dismissive or outright disrespectful. I would use sarcasm to minimize the other person's perspective, to minimize any valid points that they would have because they didn't align with my points, my understanding, my perspective. I was trying to push my point across, and I realized I learned that from somewhere. I learned that from how I saw people argue, from how I saw people assert themselves when they believed they were right. So I repeated it. I would raise my voice, add pressure, say something stronger. But that never brought understanding. It just created distance. So I've come to the fifth and final realization I've had was how all of these things would create isolation and loneliness. Over time, it started to affect my relationships more broadly. It became difficult for me to sit with people who saw things differently than I did. I couldn't understand how people could be so cavalier about being wrong. And obviously, my viewpoint was right. And if you didn't have my viewpoint, you were wrong. And this was the hard line that I've driven for myself and for the expectations that I've had for people. Even though intellectually, I understood that everyone has their own perspective, their own experiences, their own way of seeing the world. I struggled to understand that fully, especially with people close to me. There was this expectation, sometimes unspoken, that we should align, that we are close, we understand each other, we're in each other's lives. There should be an alignment in how we think. But even that is loaded because the alignment that I felt or that I wanted was that people should see it the way that I saw it, not the way that they see it, because obviously that was wrong. It should have been based on how I saw it, that they should see it the way I saw it, and that should be that. And when they didn't, it created tension. Sometimes the tension was subtle. Sometimes it was obvious. But it was consistent enough that it made connection harder. It made relationships harder. And eventually, it made things feel more distant than I wanted them to be. And somewhere in all of that, I started to notice something I couldn't ignore. This need to be right wasn't helping me. It was costing me severely. So, what shifted? What I notice now is that being right was doing more than I thought it was. It wasn't just helping me communicate, it was helping me stay in control. Control of the conversation, control how I was seen, control of whether I felt grounded or exposed. And I didn't always recognize that because on the surface, it looked like clarity. But underneath that, there was a need to stay certain. And certainty can feel very similar to honesty, but they're not the same. What I'm starting to notice is that being right can create a kind of distance, a distance that's hard to see in the moment because everything still sounds reasonable. Everything still makes sense, but something is missing. There's less curiosity, less movement, less room for something unexpected to enter. And I could feel that now when it happens, not as a thought, but as a shift. The conversation tightens, my body tightens, and without saying it directly, I already decided where things are going to land. And when that happens, I'm not really in the conversation anymore. I'm just maintaining a position. I can also notice that when I let go of needing to be right, even slightly, something changes. Not in a dramatic or even in a noticeable way, but enough to feel. There's a little more space, a little more listening, a little more uncertainty. And that used to feel uncomfortable. Now it feels closer to something I actually want. What I'm still unsure about is where the balance is between clarity and openness, between honesty and certainty. I don't know when being right supports connection and when it quietly replaces it. I don't know how to stay grounded without becoming rigid, or how to stay open without feeling like I'm losing something. I'm still paying attention to that. I wanted to say this out loud and see what stayed. That's where I'll leave it for now. If this content spoke to you in any way, I would love to hear about it. Please reach out at Lessons Reconsidered on Instagram, Facebook, Substack, and YouTube. There will be a Substack before each episode that dives deeper into a topic. You can also reach the podcast by email at lessonsreconsidered@gmail.com. There will be a link tree in the description for you depending on the platform you have found this podcast. I would like to thank the incredible Matt Mogson for the use of our intro and outro song, Break Down Those Walls. You can find this and other incredible music by Matt Mogson on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, and Apple Music. Thank you for taking the time to revisit old lessons with me, and I hope it gives you more insight into the lessons that have helped shape who you are. I look forward to exploring more with you on the next episode.
Tear down those walls, break down those barriers. Life is just beginning for you. No greater power in this